Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Welcome to the inaugural installment of me reading The Life of Washington, Life of George Washington by Washington Irving. I'm going to trip up a lot over those names. Let me introduce you to this one. So, in September of 2023, I tried reviving my Brother Trucker Book Club podcast, but here on the channel. And I made it about a month into that before I scrapped it just because it was enjoyable to do, but there's so much time that goes into preparing and editing one of those episodes that it really became the only thing that I was doing on the weekends instead of writing or drawing or working on another creative project. I couldn't commit that time to it without sacrificing what I really want to do, which is make books. So punted on that, but one of the segments on it was a long-term reading project, and so I would kind of do a book of the week and then an update on that reading project and then tell a trucking story and then cover a movie of the week, etc., etc. The long-term reading project that I was tackling at the time was this Life of George Washington book. So I did a few installments on that, but very few people saw them, and overall it was just a wash in terms of efficacy. So I shelved the book, but I wanted to get back to it. So I've reread, the introduction and a couple of early chapters in it. And I thought, well, why don't I do what I did with Shogun last year, where I'll pick at it here and there, and every couple of days I'll update you guys on where I'm at in the biography. So in this inaugural episode, what I want to cover is, why is this biography of Washington different from any of the others? Well, there are two others that I know that I will eventually read. One of them is by Douglas Southall Freeman, and he wrote a 7-volume biography of the man, so I know that it's very, very detailed. And then there's Ron Chernow's, which is a little bit more recent. I think he published that within the last 10 years. And I've read 3 other biographies by Chernow that I really liked. They were all great. So I know that I like his style, and that he restricts the urge to editorialize when he's talking about facts, even though a biographer will want to lend his own voice to commentary on the subject. The unique thing about Washington Irving creating a biography of George Washington is that these men, albeit briefly, were contemporaries. Little Washington Irving met George Washington when he was only 7 years old, and the father of America was advanced in years. George Washington died in 1799, and I'm trying to remember what year it was when little Irving met him. But Washington Irving was named after George Washington, as I'm sure several American babies were around that time period, obviously with George Washington being as popular as he was. The reason Washington Irving is known to us is because he was the first American writer to really make a living as a writer. He wrote both fiction and non, accounts of his travels and such. What few people will know, though, is the extent of Washington Irving's poverty. Just because he was the first American to support himself as a popular writer didn't mean that he was making hundreds and hundreds of dollars, which at the time would have been a lot of money. There were times when he struggled, he scraped by, he never married or had kids. He knew that he wouldn't be able to support them or afford them, but he also knew that he would be miserable if he tried to do anything else. So he was happy to be an uncle, but at the same time, his family was constantly trying to influence him and leverage him, say, hey, we'll get you a position doing some other job, you can make more money, you can settle down and have a family. He was so committed not just to his craft, but to his own vision for his own life, that he knew that if he was around his family, he would eventually cave to the pressure and give up on what he felt that he was best at doing. So he left the United States, and he spent 17 straight years in Europe before returning home, supporting himself as a writer abroad, living in a hotel and stuff. So he was committed to his craft. He wasn't able to really revel in making extra sales and stuff. But his work has stood the test of time, and we're still reading it today. Obviously, he's going to be best known for writing The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle and such. But his biography of Washington was a project that he wanted to tackle throughout his life. And by the time he was getting advanced in years, up into his 50s and such, he decided, he goes, I better tackle this now or else I'm not physically going to be able to. And sure enough, within a short period of time, weeks or months, I want to say, of him finishing the manuscript for this book, he died. It was the swan song project of his, and he brought his full faculties and talents and experience to bear in creating this work. So in addition to him being slightly contemporary, but really contemporary to the period, and having the ability to go visit sites that Washington was affiliated with and interview relevant sources and see the ramifications and impact of this man's life while it was still fresh in the national memory. In short, in him being so close to the life and works of Washington, he's got a perspective that will not be dulled by time or the changing attitudes of different eras, to which I think Freeman and Chernow, for better or worse, will be somewhat subject to. Once I finish reading this one, I will eventually read the Chernow book. In fact, it'll probably be the next Washington book that I read, only because the Freeman books are so long. There's 7 of them. And I have a different biography written by Freeman about Robert E. Lee that's only 4 volumes long that I still need to read first. So, but I decided if I'm looking at these 3, Irving, Freeman, and Chernow, I wanted to tackle Irving first just because he was so close to the subject, and obviously felt that he had a very personal connection to the man, what was being named after him. So that's the introduction to this particular book and why I felt it was valuable to read it. I've read the first 6 chapters, and they're pretty brief, despite this being a very long book. They briefly, but in some detail, analyze the origins of the man, going all the way back to the beginnings of the Washington family genealogy, which, from our perspective, is about 1,000 years old. There's the year that the Norman conquering happened and all that in England, which, when was that? Roughly 1,000 years ago. They talk about the origins of how family names happened. Like the original Washington name was De Wessington. There was a castle called Wessington, and if you were of the nobility and you were put in charge of a place, you were named after that place. De Wessington just became Wessington, then became Washington, and then became Washington over time. These names change over time. The family came to Virginia in the late 1600s, early 1700s, and established estates there and stuff. His father, August Washington, was married twice. This was in an era where it was not uncommon for people to marry more than once in their lifetime, though not because of divorce, because of being widowed. And August Washington was a widower, and he had, I believe it was 2 kids that he said by his first wife, and then more by his second. There was an elder son named Lawrence Washington by the first wife, and then George was by the second wife. And although there was a broad span of years between the 2 of them, George looked up to Lawrence and had a great affection for him and even wanted to emulate him. Lawrence went on to receive military training, and George wanted to emulate that. When he went to school, he would play war with the kids on the playground, and they would do maneuvers and march and stuff, and all in the fashion that George had observed from Lawrence. He was also very big. Shane Gillis has a joke about that, how he was 6'2" back then, which is like 6'10" now, and the average dude in the Revolutionary War was like 5'2" or something, like pretty short. And so just getting a guy that was 6'2", he was always going to be massive. And when you're talking about anything physical, you're going to look at the biggest kid on the field and be like, yeah, he's probably going to be pretty freaking good at this. He also had his own military education, and his family was pretty well off, so he got to go through that whole circuit where you make connections and you you graduate high in your class, et cetera, et cetera. And then he had a military career and served the colonies during the French and Indian War. The chapters that I'm in now are getting deep into the specifics of this, and this is where I kind of like tend to not like glaze over it, but just I absorb it, or rather I read it, I scan it and stuff, but I don't absorb it in the sense that I could then recount the specific details of on this day they moved here, they encountered this, they did that. There was a time when he was in charge of a fort and had to negotiate basically a surrender and a retreat from the French under stressful conditions. And it's worth recording that just so you can see his aptitude for doing this in a way that befit the command that he held. He didn't want to leave with shame, but obviously they didn't have the martial prowess and force to bear to withstand the French incursion. The French wanted the colonials to surrender the fortress and give them all the stores inside, and Washington's like, look, obviously we can't keep him from coming in here, but we're not going to give up all of the supplies. We're going to have conditions and stuff. And this was at a time when officers were expected to deal honorably with each other, and if you gave a man your word, you were expected to hold it. And this went as much for the British as it did for the French. So that's where I'm at now. We get a pretty good picture of the early life of the man and how it shaped his bearing later on. Although he did have, obviously, a military career as a member of British colonial Virginia, he wasn't this unstoppable force at the time. And let's be real, he also wasn't initially during the Revolutionary War. He lost his fair share of contests, but there were other qualities that were relevant that made him a force to be reckoned with in the long run. And I think the type and manner of his losses were key to teaching him and shaping him and giving him the experience that he needed to win a protracted battle between the United States, the colonies, the Continental Congress, or whatever, and the Brits. So that's where we're at now. I believe I'm about to start chapter 7, so I'll listen to chunks of it here and there over the next couple of weeks. I don't want to burn through it and just get to the end and be like, oh, what did you think of it? Oh, I think George Washington was pretty cool. The book was good. You guys should go read it. Like, I want to give you a little bit something more to chew on along the way, kind of like I did with digesting Shogun, that very long book that I read last year. So anyway, let me know what you guys think, and stay tuned for the next segment. Until next time, drive safe. See you out there.